Gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of Pendle Council's Executive. And I'll start with apologies. We've got apologies from lateness from Councillor Andy Bell, who was busy setting up the beer pumps in Comtown Hall for the Blues Festival, and said, "What meeting? What meeting?" So he's on his way from Colne. And Councillor David Hartley, who's moving his canal boat because the marina on which it's moored is suffering from low water, and he needs to move it to an area of the marina that's got deeper water. So I thought that was a right excuse, but there you go. I think everybody else is here. Thank you very much. Item 1, declarations of interest. And this is where we have got a veritable cornucopia of declarations to give out. So, pardon? Well, we'll do that in a minute. So, declarations of interest. On item 7, those of us who are members of any of the council's joint ventures need to declare that interest, and as I understand it, we've got a dispensation, so that's what we say. Declaring interest as a member of Dum board, but we've got a dispensation. So I'll do that for that one. Hanif, item 8, you need to declare an interest on that one. Yeah, but you've a dispensation, that's right. So are there any further interests that need to be declared, please? Sarah?
Apparently me as well for item 7, though of course I have no vote.
Well, I'm not sure. Have you got a dispensation?
Well, yes. That was the implication of yes. Sorry, obviously I didn't know who was going to be attending exec tonight, and therefore I failed to include other potential directors in that. But for the benefit of those directors who are not members of the executive, yes, for tonight, for this item, because it's an item on governance of the joint ventures, I thought it was right that those directors were able to take part in the meeting tonight for that item.
Yeah. I don't think Howard and I necessarily see eye to eye on this. To my mind, you declare an interest, but it's not prejudicial, but apparently the new arrangements don't allow for that nuance. Chris?
Thank you, Chairman. If we in the audience seats are to declare as well,
yes,
please put me down on the governance issue.
Yes, so that's as a director on joint venture companies. Yeah, very good. Are there any other prejudicial interests? Asjad?
Yes, the same.
Thank you very much. Are there any others? Nope. Very good. Right. We will do introductions, and I'm not filibustering in order for Councillor Bell to get here, but you know. There you go. My name's David Whip, and I am leader of Pendle Council, and I chair the executive.
Good evening, I'm Philip Spur, Director of Police at Pendlebury Council.
Good evening, Karen Spence, Director of Resources at Pendlebury Council.
Councillor Whip.
Sarah Coburn-Price, Councillor at Bullsworth and Fulridge.
Ash Sutcliffe, Councillor for Hosfield and Waterside. I almost forgot my own name then.
Councillor David Coburn-Price for Bullsworth and Fulridge.
Chris Church, Councillor for Barnoldswick.
David Walker, Assistant Director for Operational Services.
Councillor Zafar Ali, representing Briarfield East and Clover Hill, newly appointed member of the Executive for Housing and Customer Services.
Councillor Hanif, Briarfield West and Greenland.
Last Chairman, I've moved Deputy Leader of the Council.
And to the rear?
Hi, Neil Watson, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Control and Regulatory Services.
Lynn Rowland, the Committee Administrator.
Howard Culshaw, Head of Legal and Democratic Services.
Lawrence Conway, Interim Chief Exec for Pendlebury Council.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is public question time. So this is an opportunity for any members of the public, not members of the council, to ask questions that do not appear on the agenda. Are there any? Thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the last meeting. Would somebody move those as a correct record? Are they seconded? Thank you very much. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 4. This is to notify people that, as already mentioned, Councillor Zafar Ali has replaced Councillor Iqbal on the executive, and that's with the portfolio of housing community services. Can I thank Councillor Mohammed Iqbal very much for his contribution to the work of the executive, both in this iteration and in previous iterations, and obviously wish him well for the future.
Second that.
Thank you very much. We'll put that on record. Thank you. Which takes us to item 5, which is the pavement licensing policy. And Hanif, this is in your bag.
Thank you. Chair, this is obviously what we're discussing here is the payment licensing policy. And just for the audiences at home, a payment, I'm just going to read 3.1. A payment license is a license granted by the local authority which allows the license holder to place removable furniture over certain highways adjacent to the premises in relation to which the application was made for certain purposes. I think the Chair is a straightforward document. If we approve this today, it will go for a 6-week public consultation, and the results will come back to us for final decision. I move we accept this policy.
Thank you very much. There was one issue that I flagged up previously, and had some correspondence with Neil about, and I'm aware that, well, there's at least one, maybe more, but there's one pavement licence that's been approved that isn't on the highway, and the policy says that they can only be on the highway, which makes a bit of sense with them being a pavement licence. But we're going to have other measures put in place that will box off those instances where that is the case. So we can't obviously include it in a pavement licence policy because it's not a pavement, but we do need to have something else that regulates that use. I've got Asjad and then I've got Lola.
Yeah, happy to second the report. But one thing I will say is, actually it's a question. So also, item number 3.6 says that it is for 3 years. That's because of practicality wise, or can we reduce that to 1 year? And then, is that constantly review, got more control? Is that a possibility in the future?
Well, 3.6 says that any pavement licence...
So 3 years plus 12 months extension of what?
Okay, all right. I think that's perhaps enshrined in the legislation, but Neil, did you...
Chairman, we've said we want to give businesses some flexibility so they're not always embroiled in bureaucratic processes. With that, we thought 1 year was too short. They will keep having to go through it for probably no reason. The policy does allow us to review and revoke if there are problems with those. We thought 2 years is probably the right length of time, and the legislation doesn't allow us to go beyond that anyway.
Okay.
But if you want to reduce it to say 1 year, is that something that we could do with the local authority future? Personally, I would propose one year, and the reason I say that is because we have some issues in Nelson, and I think I'll give you an example of Going Dutch. They are trading from the pathway, and also from a van that's parked there all the time, in a no entry kind of position, and I don't know how they've been allowed to do that. And the way things are going across the other side, you know, there's a blockage of the highways. People can't get prams past it. It's quite a busy road, car road. So you know there are issues. And if you go on Scotland Road, there's a fruit place shop, and they put all the fruit out onto the pavement. And again, if you've got a wheelchair or a trolley or a pram, you know, it's very difficult to pass through. And I think we just need to be a little bit more strict, and especially considering the, you know, the regeneration that's taking place within the Nelson Town Centre. I think 1 year they could keep tab on things. Where the highway is wide enough to accommodate, you know, I think that's something we can look at. And we have, I think, previously on Manchester Road given a cafe, I think it's Chaiwalla, I think, you know, to put chairs and tables outside, which we encourage. And I think there's another one again on Manchester Road near the old HSBC bank. So we are supportive of the businesses, but I think it's just getting a bit out of control. And I noticed in Briarfield as well, if you're going through it's a very busy main thoroughfare for the last 2 months or so. Again, that pavement is blocked, so you don't want it to become a problem. So
okay. My suspicion is that these businesses are operated outside the pavement licensing policy. They wouldn't fit within the criteria to get a pavement licence for the nature of what you just said. But I would say that one size does not fit all, and that there are, you know, you may find there's problems in Nelson, and I agree, if the pavement is narrowed to such an extent that it's impassable, that's an issue that should be taken up. But it would be the county council who would do that. However, in Bonolswick, for instance, and there's a picture of Bonolswick Town Square on the front of the draft policy, we've got a greengrocer that puts out fruit and veg. I think that adds to the liveliness of the street scene. There's plenty of pavement width, and indeed we actually increased the width of pavement in order to facilitate people having street furniture, tables and chairs, displays on their frontages. So I wouldn't be wanting to see the county council come down like a ton of bricks on people across the borough. It's more horses for courses. Now then, Councillor Lawler-Whip, you've got 1 or 2 points you want to raise.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, just on the point of the length of time that the licences are granted for, I think it's right that that time is as long as possible. Most of the businesses in Pendle are locally owned, a lot of them sole traders, and we shouldn't overly introduce administrative burdens on them. I think that would be very unfair. And just in terms of the policy itself, I'm glad to go into consultation for the 6 weeks. I think there are some things that I'm just a bit hesitant with. On page 5, this is something that would not normally be allowed to be granted. The site does not allow the licence holder, staff and customers to park in a safe manner. A lot of the premises that this would apply to don't have any parking at all. Are they then obstructed from getting granted a pavement licence?
Okay, well, I'm not sure, you know, if you don't think that that's a sensible criteria to include, you know.
Yeah. I just, when I'm going through policy, I'm trying to think what are the aims of this part of the policy, and this one just seems to...
Neil?
It's an eventuality that may not occur, and I suspect it doesn't for many, but it's if that caused inconvenience for the users elsewhere, i.e. the pavement was then going to be used and it will create an obstruction. So it's just really to cover all bases. But I suspect in 99% of cases that's not going to apply.
I can't see the circumstances where it would be legitimate for a business holder or anybody else to park on the pavement. So, to my mind, I'd just strike that one out. It's a bit of a nonsense.
I've got further, so further to that, I'm aware of in other areas, they've used these sorts of licences to extend into on-street parking, parallel parking bays. Is that something that this policy would see introduced here as well? Does the legislation allow for that sort of thing? You know, is there a mechanism to stop up that parking bay for businesses that applies for a licence in that area?
And this policy is specific for pavements, it won't extend into, for example, it says shared services, strips will be excluded. So this policy wouldn't allow for those to go into the formal parking areas on the street. That's what the policy is designed to prevent.
So is that our policy, or is that the legislation set by government?
If I'm absolutely honest, I'd have to look at that piece of the legislation. I don't know whether the legislation does allow that to happen. I know in COVID it did, but I'm not certain it does. So I'd have to check that, Chairman.
I just think, you know, if we want to maximise what our businesses can do, and if there's a great opportunity to expand a business into an on-street parking spot, that we should have a mechanism to allow that, and I think it should be included in this policy. You know, if they can justify it, and if it will bring, I mean, a parking spot, you know, one, maybe maximum of 4 customers for over, you know, 2-3 hours if they're parking there for a while. Whereas if you have 4 tables out in that parking spot, you've got 16 customers there. Maybe every half hour, you know, that's up to 30 plus customers. So I think for the livelihood of the town centres, it would be useful to have a mechanism that allowed you to expand onto the parking bays with your outdoor seating.
I suspect that the Highway Authority, the County Council, would have some view about that.
I'm sure they would.
And my suggestion would be not to try and push the boundaries at this point, but see what comes back as a consequence of the consultation. And if there is demand for using carriageway for what is effectively the pavement licence use, then we need to look at that and have that dialogue with LCC. I think there's a lot of merit in it. You see it in a lot of other communities and a lot of the towns now, and it adds to the liveliness of the street scene. So let's take that one.
I think it's a bit outside the box for the consultation, so I'd just like to look at that separately.
Okay. Anything further?
Just a question on the council will not permit any wheeled refuse containers, beer kegs, bottle crates on or adjacent to. I know. Sorry, that's page 6. Council will not permit any wheeled refuse containers. I'm just aware, you know, the businesses have to, as part of the licence, have a way to deal with waste, and obviously this stuff needs to be brought inside and out or around the back of the property on a daily basis. So I'm just curious, does that mean that you could install a bin but it just can't have wheels? And again, I'm just trying to think
It's to stop it cluttering it up and to make it, what we want from this is to make it look well and to enhance the area. And if you start having bins, etc. around there, it's going to start to take away from what the policy is there to try and achieve. It's really a cosmetic thing.
Yeah. I just know that they have to put stuff out to the plan of the licence. So this extra addition of no wheeled bin containers seems superfluous if you can control that with the planning arrangements. I just think if it's in the best interest of the operation to have a bin outside, and they can prove in the planning stage, applying for this application, that it will look sightly, we shouldn't outright ban it from the policy stage.
So it reads to me that you can have a bin, but it ain't got to have any wheels on it. There's another part of the proposed policy on page 5 which says the council is not satisfied that applicants have made satisfactory arrangements for the storage and collection of all refuse associated with the business. So on the one hand we're saying, well, you've got to be able to deal with your waste, but on the other hand we're telling them they can't have a bin, which from experience on Bonaldswick Town Square, the way to manage the waste is to have plenty of bins, and when you've got additional activities you put more bins out. So currently Bonaldswick Town Council have 6 wheeled bins which are located around the town square, some in close proximity to people that have pavement licences, and that helps to control and manage any litter that there might be, and in fact make it a lot easier for Mr Walker's operative to sweep up on the following day. So I tend to lean in favour of Councillor Lawler-Whip's hesitancy about the wheeled refuse containers. You know, perhaps take that out. Hanif, can I just get you to comment? There's 2 issues there. First of all, striking out the bullet point, the site does not allow the licence holder, staff and customers to park in a safe manner, and secondly, taking out the phrase any wheeled refuse containers from the paragraph on page 6. Are you content with those?
Yeah. Just for clarification, the wheel bins, so if they've got no wheels and it's a bin, they can have that.
They just have to carry it.
So I'm just saying, if we don't want a bin, why can't we just say bin? Why do we have to specify wheeled bin? I'm just so confused now. So they're going to have a bin.
Well,
but you can't have a wheel bin.
In some sense, well, that's what it says.
Yeah, what's the difference? Just trying to understand.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Chairman, the purpose of it was, and through experience of dealing with a lot of different people, if you start to allow wheel bins and kegs, what you'll do is you'll detract from the ambience and what we're trying to create, which is a good, nice.
We're not trying to exclude kegs. We're just saying bins. They should be allowed bins.
But and I'm in your hands clear on this, but what the 4th bullet point, 5th bullet point is saying, how are you to do? What we don't want is a load of refuse bins around and then them coming throwing them in and waste being deposited and it looks a mess. That's the idea behind it, so that they make better arrangements for less unsightly.
I see your point, Neil, and again I'd just say that, you know, the layout and contents of the street furniture are set out in the application stage. So if that includes a bin, that includes a bin. And if they're, you know, adding extra stuff later on, it doesn't matter what you banned here, they can't have it anyway because it's not part of the arrangement that's been agreed in the licence.
So simplify that for the consultation.
I'd understand that this, removing that line would make the officer's job slightly harder in that they have to have a more, they have to have more consideration to the appearance of the area than just an outright policy ban. But
yeah, okay.
And just on the beer kegs, I mean, if you've got a micro bar, and they could actually look quite good as a decorative arrangement. So it's, I would delete that too, if I'm honest.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I would quit while you're ahead, but Zafar. Okay. All right then. It would seem to me it would be perfectly sensible for a business to perhaps have a bin in order to manage the waste, which otherwise might end up on the floor. And I couldn't, in all honesty, differentiate between a wheeled bin and another bin. So I would strike out wheeled refuse containers, but leaving beer kegs, bottle crates on or adjacent to the pavement area. Are we content with that consensus? Yeah?
Yeah.
Are there any further points?
There is, on page 6 still, if we go 2 points down from that, A-boards and advertising signs. I think, yeah, there's some consideration in those, in that, you know, they can be quite obstructive of the pavement, especially if you've got tails and shares out as well. But again, I mean, I'd just consider, would you again take any advertisement signs as part of the arrangement plan submitted in here, and if it is suitable for that location, you allow them? Do we need an outright ban from policy? Because, I mean, if we think about, again, I go back to Van Olswijk just as familiar as being familiar. Cafes put out the pricing specials of the day on the airboards, and people can look at them as they go past. And, you know, some of them look really good, you know, chalkboards, and they've got drawings on in different colours, and they look really spectacular. And we're saying can't have that from the outset here.
Okay, so I think the key word here is unapproved items. So if within the pavement licence application they include a menu board or a bin or whatever, then that's approved as part of the application. I think what this is saying is that they could then put additional A-boards or advertising signs or other unsightly items adjacent to their pavement licence bit. Yeah. And I agree with you fully. If you go down Albert Road in Barley, you've got a number of premises that have boards outside that say street food, you know, menu of the day, all that sort of stuff, and it adds to the street scene. It doesn't detract. It's not unsightly.
Yeah, I mean, up to that point, I mean, I would just delete anything that's, you know, outright prohibiting any specific items, and just say any miscellaneous furniture must be included as part of the licence application.
I think that would be a reasonable form of words. Yeah? So any miscellaneous items should be included within the pavement licence application. Yeah? Okay. I've got a whole host of people over here who are desperate to come in. Have you got any further points?
Not Peter.
Okay. All right. David, I think you were the first one.
Yes, mine was just a small one really. In the intro, in 3.9, we talk about the fact that 15 items already and the fee of £100 was set as part of the trading range. I then flow that into page 7 of the licence, where there's a sort of ...
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, we can charge more, but I'm assuming we're going £100 again.
No, that's not necessarily the case. We want to see what it costs and level of demand. We don't want the consultation to be focused on what the charge will be. We want the consultation to be looking at these other issues which we've been going into for some time. So that, as it says in the report, is to be determined at a later date. Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether it was Sarah or Ash.
Both of us.
Okay.
Ash Bud.
Speak together in unison.
Thank you, Chair.
Harmony.
So, firstly, I have to argue against Councillor Mahmood's argument about the length of the term for the licence. As you have already said, I think numerous of you mentioned about the onerous bureaucracy that it places on a small business. I think that's right to go for the full length that you can possibly have according to the law. I think that's very useful. So that's one thing, one reason to keep it at the 2 years. But the other thing is about cost, because quite often there's quite an expense to be paid in terms of the chairs and tables are being put outside the business, so they're investing in that business quite heavily, and if that's only for 12 months that could then be revoked, then they're less likely to do that. But also, you know, what do they do if after 12 months, if they've got a lot of expensive furniture that they've invested for 12 months, not had any sort of payback from it yet? It might be the case that there's actually a really productive business case for 2 years, but not one for 12 months. So I think that's one part of that. In terms of your A boards, I think it would be appropriate to have an A board within the licensed area, and in here it says adjacent to, and I agree with the policy wording that says adjacent to the licensed area. I don't want to see A boards outside of the licensed area, and people do put A boards across all sorts of places obstructively, and in some stupid places in certain cases, usually when a business first opens, they think, I'm going to put an A board outside, they plonk it on the pavement and it becomes an obstruction. It's not malicious in any way, it's just that that's what they want to do as business, advertise, but they've not really kind of thought about the obstructions that it causes. So I think that it's sensible to include that within that licensed area. Wheeled bins. I hate wheeled bins. I think they look really ugly on the highway. I think they look awful, and I think they would be much better to have a simple, small bin within the licensed area. I understand what you were saying, Councillor Whip, about having this thing designed within the original application. You specify that as part of the layout of that particular plot outside. But actually, if I see those large wheel bins around Barlick Square, I don't think that they look good. I don't think they add to the ambience in any way. They might be practical, but they certainly don't help matters. And over the weekend, we've got the Blues Festival. I guess this is where there might be an exception to the rule, is that we will have various wheeled bins that make life easier for David Walker's team to be able to make sure that the town is clean, because we'll have literally thousands of people on there. So an event like Bands on the Square, fine, have a wheeled bin. I think that's appropriate. But as a day-to-day thing, where someone has a 2-year licence, I really don't want to see a wheeled bin outside a business. I don't want to see it. I think it's much more appropriate to have a neat, tidy, small refuse bin that can be emptied on a regular basis. And that obviously helps with environmental health as well, because you're not ending up with large quantities of waste kept in one place, because they quite often smell. I know they're enclosed and lidded, but I don't want, they're usually bright orange. They don't look good. So I think.
Well, in our universe, the nature of the bin would be determined at the point where the licence application is approved. Okay. And I agree with you that you won't be looking at a 240 litre container. It would have to be appropriate. But I think the point was well made that in order to facilitate setting up and taking down, it very much helps if sometimes you've got wheels on stuff. So I don't think we should sort of ban wheels, if you get me drift.
Well, ban the wheeled bins. That's the point that I am making. Because in very strong terms, I think they are ugly, and there's a reason that in planning we usually specify where bins are kept, because they are ugly and unsightly. I don't want to see them on my high street. I don't want to see my neighbouring business having a wheeled bin outside of their premises on a legitimately licensed part of the pavement.
As written,
I think that's a very strong argument.
As written, somebody who attaches wheels to the bottom of a bin of whatever nature, and it could be a paper bin, would not be allowed to have that outside. And I don't think that that's a reasonable perspective, to be honest. If the application sets out something that is reasonable, fine, let them do it. And if it's an ugly 240 litre grey bin, we'd probably turn around and say, well, sorry, that's not appropriate. But if it's a decorative bin with wheels on it, let them do it. Sarah?
Strangely, I managed to communicate to Ash through ESP exactly what I was going to say.
Very good. Okay. Right. And are you indicating, or am I going back to Lola?
Just to say, the bottom of page 5 does require any furniture to be shown that it can be moved easily and stored away at night. So nothing can be left out. It all needs to be movable. So I think wheels are quite reasonable. Especially if you've got to drag it all the way around the terrace to the back to put it into the trade waste skips. I mean, that can be quite a distance. Anyway,
yeah.
I don't think there's any policy points that indicate there's a certain level of good design with an application. Does anyone?
That's in there, isn't it?
Oh, right,
Well, you've got all sorts of it.
oh, I must have missed that.
Yeah, you've got a design with paper.
I'm surprised that you've missed one. Go on.
No, I was just, I mean, there's the tables and chairs, but any other furniture, I'm not sure if it states that, but I think that should be just be picked up maybe. If
Okay.
The other thing was the width, the unobstructed width of the pavement, I think is set at 2 metres, and in exceptional circumstances can be brought down to 1.5. I'm just wondering, I mean, usually 1.2 is like the minimum width for an accessible, pedestrian route.
We're not going to argue over 300 millimetres, are we?
It could make quite a difference on a pavement. And just, is that part of the legislation, or is that something that someone's picked at Pendle?
I mean, thinking of in practical terms, the pavements with licences in Barnoldswick, and that's where the majority of these pavement licences are. They're in Barlick, they're on Albert Road, on the town square. The pavements are 3 metres wide, and the licences take up about a third of the width, so that does leave 2 metres, as long as somebody doesn't put their A-board out. So, I mean, 2 metres sounds about right. Minimum width 1.5 sounds good to me.
That's under exceptional circumstances.
Yeah.
I think the width, unobstructed width, needs to be revised in this document, really. Well, I think 1.2, given that that's the sort of the national minimum guidance of an accessible route is 1.2.
Chairman, 2 metres of 1.8 to 2 metres are footpath pavements. You're thinking about
standard
public rights of way, which is a metre?
No. 1.2 is the like engineering highway minimum.
Can we design pavements on housing schemes that are at 1.8? That's the standard we go to.
Yeah.
We're thinking of people with prams and children, etc. And meters.
The standards are wider than the minimums, yeah.
And Eve?
I think it's also wants to say something else, which you just elaborate, please.
Oh no, it was just I've just looked the legislation up, and you cannot grant these on the carriageway itself.
Right.
Okay.
It's only on a pavement.
Right. So that would be a highway Lancashire County Council issue until we get a unitary authority, and then it would all be in one unitary authority. I think so, because we've only spent half an hour on this so far. Okay. So, Andy.
Just to clarify, I just spoke to Councillor Lawler. The 1.5 metres is actually in here in the operational on page 15, which gives that 1.2 is access to the building. So it's that safe access there, the 1.5 width on the carriageway. So it is there.
Okay. Right. As I understand it, what we are voting on is a policy which excludes the second bullet point on page 5. I'm going to have to put my other glasses back on. Excludes that bullet point on page 5, and on page 6 there's a revised form of wording on the paragraph that talks about wheeled refuse containers. We are not accepting the reduction in the licence period. Okay. Asdad?
Just a bit of clarification.
To current general grants that are given, and that leaves us an instant shortfall of £204,000. We've got £120,000 additional expenditure on Pendle Rise because we're going to have to keep that going until November rather than the anticipated date of September when we're going to do it. something else that's coming up, although it isn't included in these figures, is that you'll have seen the email today about the protracted negotiations about the market hall at Colne, and as a consequence of that we will be continuing to incur the temporary market accommodation on Hartley Square in Colne. So in due course that's going to be more expensive. What's not yet included in this is any of the what I would hope would be additional income from investments, which we, as we found at the end of the last financial year, turned a deficit into a surplus. Now we have budgeted for a higher level of investment income this year, so I'm not expecting the sort of outturn that we had earlier in this financial year, from last financial year. But I think once those figures start to come through, it might ameliorate the position somewhat. On the capital side, I think that the programmes are going as well as might be expected. I have got concerns that we could be dealing with disabled facilities grants more expeditiously, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on and ensure that we're making the best use of those DFGs. So I've not got anything else to say. I would propose that we do note the position on both the revenue and the capital budgets. Is that seconded? Seconded. Karen, is there anything that you want to comment?
No, Chair, you've covered it completely as I would have done. So.
Okay then. David?
Thank you, Chair. Para 3.1, the sort of starting point, we obviously have a budget of 17.639. We add in the slippage and we add in the revenue grant slippage. That comes to more than 19,373. That comes to 19,643, which is an extra 270,000.
Karen, sums?
There must be a reason for it. There must be other things that move that's not highlighted in that paragraph.
Right, so that's a couple of the items that account for the variance in the budget. Okay. In the table then on 3.3, obviously I understand where the 302 projected overspend comes from, and as you note in table 2, that's probably where that's going to be funded from, at least at this stage. The first set of figures, the second, third and fourth columns are obviously the first quarter's numbers. I think that there's something wrong in the way they're presented there, because if you look at the budget to date and the actual to date and do the maths to get the actual over or under, they're the sort of wrong way round. So the directorate budget of 135, spend, actual to date 170, spend, so therefore it should be a 35 overspend, not underspend.
Yeah, you're right. Apologies. Yeah. I think it's the title that's wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. The brackets around the wrong.
But obviously you probably need the consistency in the brackets, because obviously the final column got unders in brackets as well.
Yeah.
And obviously we get some explanations about where the under and overspends are taking place. Things like financial services has that vacancy variance. In the planning, building control and regulatory services, we've got a projected underspend of 157,000. And I just wondered whether there's any reason why we're underspending on our planning.
Well,
control.
Has he gone? He's gone.
He's gone.
Man that could tell you, he's gone. But I am aware that there have been significant issues in terms of staffing. So we've been short of planning officers.
Hasn't it? Yeah.
I don't know for a fact, but I would suspect that is a factor in that issue.
Okay. And a similar one, the one that's third from bottom there, the Revenue Services Liberator.
204,000 overspend?
Well, this is the 204,000 of specific grant that has been rolled into the general revenue grant, revenue support grant, and that wasn't picked up as part of the budget setting process. So it's money that's lost to us.
Okay, so it's a known one, as it were. Okay, looking, that's it for revenue. On the capital programme, the wonderfully colourful pages.
You'll have to forgive me on this because I can barely read.
I was going to say it's very, very tiny writing.
It's well short-sighted.
So I noted your comments on the first one on the DFG, where it actually says the fund is over committed potentially, but actual spend is yet to catch up. And obviously a few recipients will not really go to spend the amount of money that potentially they've applied for.
Well, David, on that one, my ask of officers is to see whether we could overcommit to a level that then the spend, we understand that, there's a certain percentage of applicants that don't end up claiming a grant at the end. So I think the trick is to over-program to the extent of the anticipated drop-off, and then we hit the spend. The difficulty with that is that if it doesn't go as you would expect, all of a sudden you're over-committed and you haven't got the funds to fulfil the programme that you've got set out. Yes. But I think it's a tactic to ensure that we maximise the investment.
Yes, I mean it has been a very slow-moving grant fund, hasn't it, over the years? The next one, the Empty Homes CPO, obviously we did identify we'd use some to get some temporary housing. I noticed we've got a list of 35 properties within the borough it would consider purchasing under the scheme. So is our aim to buy them, own them and maintain them, or are we buying them and selling them on to a body who's going to provide the temporary accommodation?
Well, it's our intention that there be a mix of properties that we'd use for temporary accommodation, and they would be managed by someone on our behalf.
Yeah.
And there are other properties where we might be looking at purchase, a back-to-back deal with a developer so as to get them into occupation, renovating it and then into occupation. So I think there's a bit of a mix there.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose in a way our pot is 600,000, so you can't buy 35 properties for 600 grand. So we're looking at maybe half a dozen or so, or maybe 3/4 of a dozen to actually be invested in, and the rest gets turned around.
Yes.
And the pot gets replenished.
Yeah,
again.
so you'd recycle where possible.
Yes, yes. Okay, second down in regeneration schemes, we've got the Bankhouse Road money there. Fund has not been spent within the allotted time frame, therefore will be returned to the funders imminently.
Yes, this was funding which was to relocate a gas main, and the council tried to pursue a scheme. There was an extra care scheme that was, well, the ambition was to get this extra care scheme. It was not possible to get agreement with the county council for them to provide an adequate level of funding to actually operate the extra care scheme. So that fell by the wayside, and the joint ventures, and I'm conscious here that we might have to declare an interest and leave the room, and we can't give you the pearls of our wisdom, but the joint ventures struggled to make it stack up, despite the external funding to move the gas main, and as a consequence of that, this authority put the land on the market to see whether a private sector developer could develop the land. In the meantime, we have lost the grant to move the gas main, but the latest plans that we had removed the necessity to move it anyway, so it wouldn't necessarily be coming. When are the tenders due back on that?
For yourself, Chair, end of September.
Yeah, so
Okay.
end of next month.
Okay. Final one. On the is it the final one? Yes, it is. So on page 3, the second bottom one, the computer equipment. So we've bought 139 new laptops. Is that right? How many members of staff have we got?
Bin men don't have laptops, do they?
That's a lot of laptops, that's all. And you'd imagine a sort of 3-year cycle of something, you know, a third type of thing. But
Karen?
So most of the laptops we have were bought during COVID, so unfortunately, yes, you would do a third ideally, but they'll all come to the end of the line. And we were implementing Windows 11, and the laptops we had would not run Windows 11. So that's why we've had to...
okay. Right, okay. That was all, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any further comments or questions? Nope. It's been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please. Thank you very much. That's that. Item 7 is the joint ventures. And Andy, this is yours, but you can lean on Howard.
I would love to lean on Howard for this one, Chair.
Unprepared as he is, setting up his bar at Colne Town Hall.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this is, as we know, arising from the audit that we had, querying, shall we say, the way we governed our joint venture arrangements. In a nutshell, very quickly, this recommendation is to the executive to accept that the arrangements need to be as recommended here, and that is as essentially a divorce of the interests of the council as shareholder from those directors who are sitting on the board of the joint venture companies. I might have expressed that very well. What I mean to say is we have certain councillors who are directors. They are governed by the Companies Act. They have to have strict rules that they have to follow under the Companies Act, and that is incompatible potentially, and well, not potentially. As a matter of law, we have been advised that it is not appropriate for director councillors to be sitting on matters where joint venture companies have matters on the agenda of the executive, or indeed at all, and any other meetings, and the executive should take over what is known as the shareholder function, which essentially means looking after the interests of the council, because it is a shareholder of in the companies, and the law says that directors, that's not compatible with directors' responsibilities, and therefore that's why directors have to sit out matters when they are discussed in this forum.
Thank you very much, Howard. I can say categorically that I have always acted in the public interest, and I cannot think of any occasion when that has led to a conflict with the responsibility of directors of any of the joint ventures on which I serve. I accept that the auditors have come along and said, oh, well, you need to do this and that and the other, because of what's happened elsewhere in the country, where there are some horror stories about what has happened. So, you know, it's fair enough. I think this clearly sets out the split of shareholder function from director function, and the other registrable interests issue will be one that leads us to all sorts of wonderful places, like when we're talking about stuff to do with town and parish councils, when I can see how many, just as a matter of interest, how many people councillors sat around, members of parish and town councils. You just pop your hand up. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 of us councillors in here. If we were talking about a town and parish council issue, you know, affecting all the town and parish councils generally, the meeting would be in quorate. You know, let's not go there. But the whole thing is rather a sledgehammer to crack a nut, as far as I'm concerned. But nevertheless, I would move that we note the position and accept the position, and that's seconded by Asdad. David?
Yes, just a quick question. In your intro there, you said about that you've always acted in the public's interest, but obviously the role of a director is to act in the company's interest. So, you know, public, sorry, it's the actual joint venture company.
And the point, David, is that there has never ever been a position on any of those companies where the public interest has not been served. The joint ventures were created as tools for this council to do regeneration work principally, and that's what they have done to the interest and the benefit of the public. They have not been vehicles for somebody to go on a spree doing, you know, projects that do not benefit the public. That's the point. That's the point I was making.
Absolutely. I was going to say, but sometimes that means obviously the JVs have to make some difficult decisions, of course. In terms of those decisions as well, obviously we're talking about wearing hats here. You know, we have you have a role as an exec to wear a hat. The shareholder function falls to that. I think there are several people who obviously sit on the board as well. So you've got 2 hats on as a director and then as the exec, who in a sense will then do the shareholder role. Now, of course, I sort of struggle to slightly understand exactly what then happens. Come back to the exec, and you in para 3.4 can look at business plans, agreements, etc., etc. But obviously you have no technical route back into the company again to ask questions about the business plans. So how do you ask questions as the exec of the companies in respect of their business plans and their activities?
The first part of your question is that we would declare interest and take no part in terms of issues that come back for the shareholder, and we have seen examples of that both at the executive and the full council, and I was just checking with the minutes from the last meeting when I think that was the case. So
but you can't have you all leaving the room if you're a director as well.
Well, we do. We have.
Well, it's a sort of inefficient shareholder role then, somehow.
No, that's the director role.
No, but as a shareholder, if half the shareholder board have to leave the room, then you're left with people who are just thinking, well, what do I ask about?
Well, I think that's a deficiency of slavishly having this arrangement. And I think we've examples of that where, you know, people have left the room and decisions been made, but the people who knew anything about it had to leave the room because they had to declare an interest.
Yeah.
If there were 50% of the membership of the executive or any other body affected by that those interests, then Mr. Culshaw would in all probability grant a dispensation to allow those people to participate. You know, it's a quantum matter of how many.
I think it's just going to be a challenge to make it work, that's all. Because, I mean, Pendle is a 50% plus 1 vote, I think, isn't it? Or the Pearl ones, I think. Some sort of structure like that, is it?
The votes are by consensus at the companies. So it's actually enshrined in terms of the Pearl iterations. I'm not sure about Pembroke. The consensus and an equality between the voting on the private sector side and the public sector side, despite the fact that, you know, the ratio of investment is 70 to 30.
Chair.
Howard?
Yeah, just to try and assist a little bit further, under paragraph 3.4 of the report, it is we are into new territory and a new way of running things, and I accept that, certainly. But to carry out the shareholder function, the executive will require timely provision to it of accurate, regular and detailed information from the company. This is to allow it to scrutinise the performance of the company against the objectives of its business plan. And our directors do attend the board meetings. So hopefully that there will be the flow of information that the shareholders are entitled to and require to allow them to exercise that function with in an informed way.
So as a what if then, what if, for example, we have a concern about what's in the business plan for what they might do, or the performance of the company so far? How does that question get routed to those JV boards?
Well, it would get routed to the JV board through our officers.
Okay, and then the answers would come back
through our officers.
From the officers as part of a review paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see.
But
months,
I don't think you
months,
can.
months.
I don't think you can have the situation where members who are required to declare an interest actually then respond to the issues. I understand perfectly where you're coming from, and had we been in the previous regime, I think it would have made a lot more sense, and there would have been a lot more accountability. But we are where we are, and we're trying to work through it as best we can.
I mean, I would suggest perhaps what you do is you have two separate groups of people. One is the responsibility of the shareholders and the people on this board and this exec committee of that, and then the other ones are directors of the joint ventures. So you've got two separate groups of people, and you don't overlap in the Venn diagram of complexity.
Yes, the problem with that is that, as I said, the joint ventures are a tool that this council has created in order to further the ambition to get regeneration. So you actually need people on the joint ventures who have the knowledge and position to be able to push those programs through. But you can't have it both ways. You can't have, you know, your cake and eat it. It's one thing or the other.
As an example, though, I'm not on the exec. I could be a director of one of the joint venture companies.
Your good lady is a director of one of the joint venture companies.
Yeah.
It may be that you would get caught by the requirements for spouses to declare interests on matters which I
think we're separate people in law and tax.
So, you know, it really is a nightmare.
Right, okay. How about then, what do other councils do who have joint ventures? Do they do this?
Lancashire County Council have removed all their councillors as directors, and they have got more junior officers fulfilling that role. And I mean, I think that has its disadvantages. It's certainly not a way in which Pendle Council could operate, because first of all, you know, none of the people sat around this room could operate as directors, because they couldn't then fulfil their obligations to the council. And you could not put that responsibility on the shoulders of a junior officer or a temp that's just come in to cover for somebody for 6 months. So we're in a bind.
Okay. So, we'll have
so
to
that's how Lancashire County Council do it.
And see what happens then.
And there was a range of different models, but essentially some councils put backbenchers on the JVs. Other councils have put officers on. I don't think either of those options are sensible or available to us.
I mean, in a way, what you want is you want your best people on the board of the JVs, because obviously they've got big responsibilities, for big regeneration projects, etc. Talking big amounts of money, you know, public money plus private money. You've got to keep those stakeholders happy. So you've got that challenge, and here you've got a forum which should be wholly independent, if it's going to be, and to be able to kick the tires and whatever. But yet, we're also representing the shareholder, Pendle Council, who's put those people on the board. So you've got to have potentially some sort of link, even if you've got some degree of independence.
Okay.
So,
well, despite the fact that the head of the executive, Alexander and myself, would be excluded from the decision taking, I have every confidence that of the skills and ability of the remaining members of the executive in fulfilling their function as shareholder. Asjad,
Just a very quick point.
are you seconding me? Have we already
I'm
done that bit?
No, I'm seconding that. No, the second report. Because this came about, like you said, with John Fortune's external auditors a couple of years back, and we were basically implementing the recommendations that they made to us as a Pendle Borough Council, you know, for transparency and everything. So, you know, we've received expert legal advice over the years, and you know, this is what they've come back with as a recommendation, and you know, happy to support that and to move forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it's moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Item 8 is the wavelengths and the report to be presented by Councillor Hanif, who has also declared an interest but got dispensation so that it can speak to it. Hanif.
Yeah, we've tendered for the work for the poolside play area scheme, and we got the quotation back. And what we do need is the company that's approved is Hippo Leisure, which is a specialist in this niche field. So what we need, one, is to approve the tender, and secondly, to grant a waiver, because there's only one company who can do this. So the recommendation is to approve the tender and agree with the waiver.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded? So it's moved and seconded that we agree the recommendation. Can I see those in favour? Please show. Thank you very much. Item 9, performance update report. And this would have been presented by Councillor Hartley. Was he not moving his canal boat from one part of the Grand Union to another part of the Grand Union, or another part of the marina? He wanted for me to pass on to the executive his thanks to the officers for what he described as really good performance overall. He said there are areas where the situation isn't as good as he would wish, but he appreciates that people are working hard to meet those issues and deal with them. So I'm more than happy to move the report as set out. And are there any questions? Thank you very much. If not, can we vote all those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 10 is the review of bulky household waste and replacement containers, and the options for either charging, not charging, or constraining demand. And this is Zafar's bag, but can I say that my group has consistently opposed charging for bulky household waste. We have also opposed charging for replacement wheel bins, whether they're on the pavement or wherever they may be. We oppose both charging for the wheel bins and bulk household waste, and we're committed to that. So we're not going to move from that. And if we're wanting to do anything, as far as we're concerned, there will not be any charges. This is a matter for the full council, a matter of policy. So our discussion tonight is about the recommendation from the executive to the council, and that will be on the agenda for the meeting in September. Okay. Zafar.
Thank you, Chair. So, of course, the report is split into two parts. One is in relation to bulky household waste, and of course the second in terms of replacement waste containers. Thank you for your candid sort of position in terms of charges, and as you quite rightly point out, the matter will of course be dealt with at full council. This issue has been going on for some time now, and the report itself is essentially the recommendation as set out by ONS some time ago. At the December full council meeting, there was a suggestion of the wording I can't recollect, but it was around the collection of free collections of up to 8 items, and I believe the department headed by David Walker has had difficulties in implementing that recommendation, presumably because of digital and ICT constraints. David's here, but I'm happy to take you through the recommendations, and then we can open the debate up in terms of where we might be at full council potentially. Ultimately, we need to set up a system and pass a recommendation that can be implemented by the department. The recommendation itself, over on the second, third page in, gives us 3 options. I'll just quickly be very brief on those. First option is to obviously introduce a charge, an outright charge, which is termed as a stepped charge, being £13.50 for every 4 items, etc., etc. It's all set out in the paragraph 4, or point 4 rather. Option 2, residents can continue to receive 8 free bulky waste collections per year, with up to a maximum of 9 items to be collected on each collection. And option 3 essentially is a hybrid of option 1 and 2. So you have 8 free collections with 9 items on each one, after which residents would be charged based on the stepped charging model as set out in option 1. Now, obviously, I'm happy at this point to pause and open it up in terms of where the executive wants to go in terms of the options. I see you've already highlighted the fact that you won't be supporting a stepped charge, but clearly, given the nature and the financial constraints and the financial pressures of the council, it might be a case that we need to look at some hybrid model. That being said, of course, the independent group has always stood by there not being any charges. There probably needs to be a discussion, a sensible discussion in terms of how we move forward without continuing to financially impact the department that David Walker heads up. And of course, my job is as portfolio holder to some extent be a mouthpiece for the department, to also represent the views of the department and trying to help and assist the department in its ongoing challenges. So I'll pause at that point. We have 3 options. Where do we want to go? Okay.
Well, in order to move this on, I would propose that we go for option 2, and that is that residents can continue to receive 8 free bulky waste collections per year. As I understand it, the system can identify the number of, it can go down to a property level, so we can identify how many requests there are from a particular property, and we can set a threshold, and that would meet that requirement. So, I mean, to move it forward, I would propose that we recommend to the council option 2.
Okay, Chair, I'll continue the discussion just slightly then. So, what I envisage there is what happens after the 8 free collections? Are we essentially saying that collections will continue? Or are we giving and are we empowering the department to then intervene? And if we are empowering the department to intervene, what are their powers? Do they charge? Do they just refuse to collect after rain? We need to give some guidance.
In practice, the number of collections are rationed because there are only so many slots in the calendar. And what happens is, when the slots are open up for residents, they fill up very quickly. So, to be quite frank, I think that 8 separate collections in a year, not only would be virtually impossible to achieve because of the difficulty of getting the slots, which are effectively rationed, but it's a reasonable number for people to have. 8 collections with 9 items per collection. That's 72 items. I cannot envisage where any reasonable household would have more than 72 items needing to be collected in a year. It doesn't make sense.
I suppose to some extent, Chair, it obviously looks to deal with curtailing collections, or rather the financial and environmental impact of the current policy is to be improved by option 2. It's obviously the happy medium to some extent. David is here, he's obviously listening. I don't know if we at this juncture maybe call him in and see what his views are on that.
Well, I think we know what David's views are, but I don't see the role of the executive to be a mouthpiece for Mr. Walker. I mean, I see the role of the executive to determine what the policy, or not what the policy of the council is, but it's our job to say to David, look, this is what we want you to do. We've got a different view of how things operate.
Yeah, not to you, Chair. I wasn't suggesting that. I just thought, given David has heard this part of the debate, and if we are minded to go down option 2, generally, what are the overall views on how this is going to be looking at?
Okay. David.
Thank you, Chair.
You'll have to project.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Ali has summarised, obviously, the report and the issues that were raised by the overview and scrutiny working group's findings. I think the findings at that time did actually state and show that there was about 16,000 free bulky collections made each year, and there were numerous multiple requests from certain properties, and I think, just quoting on the overview and scrutiny's report, there was, I think, 34 requests from one property, and there was over 22 requests from, over 9 items requested from over 22 properties over a 12-month period. So it is open to abuse. Option 2 does place some restrictions on it, but I think, as Councillor Ali said, some guidance on what we do beyond the ninth collection probably would be appreciated for officers to have a clear policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. My view is that if a property reaches 8 collections, the next time they try and book a collection, they say, well, we're sorry, but you've had your fill. Straightforward. I've got Asjad.
Just a quick point. Obviously, I mentioned you were over in scrutiny, trying to make the recommendations, and it's something that we considered at the budget meeting. And I think at that point we did set 8 items, but the practicalities which they came back with, I think it was the following day or the Monday after the meeting, and because we should be doing on a Thursday evening, and said practically it's going to be very difficult to implement, and they wanted the guidance. And I think that's why we're here. We need to give them that clarity. But I'll let but in fully support, again, as an independent group, or purely Labour group, always be opposed any charges. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ashley, as well. Now that you've clarified what happened after 8 items, I think that sets the story a little bit more clearer for myself, and I'm sure colleagues will agree. The other question, Chair, that we probably need to tackle at some point is the collections, are they to be linked to the property or the ratepayer? And the reason for that is because we have tenanted properties across the borough. Some are high turnover properties. So if a property is tenanted and the tenant reaches 8 collections partway in the year, bizarre as it may sound, 72 items, but we have to be pragmatic. What does the new tenant do? If the new tenant then comes into the property, puts in a collection for a collection, based on what we're resolving, will probably be turned down. How do we deal with that? Should the collections be attached to the ratepayer or the property?
Okay, but is it the tenants? Is it the landlord? If it's the landlord, I would say that's a business. It isn't eligible for domestic bulky household waste collections. It's not eligible. It's a business expense. They should get a skip in and pay for it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward to me. This is supposed to be for, residents, households, domestic, not businesses. And it may be that some of the issues that have been where businesses have been seeking to abuse the system. I don't know.
It's an issue that can occur, may well occur. Let's say it is the tenant. It's a new tenant who's moved in, a month down the line wants to arrange a collection for whatever reason, rightfully so. But the previous tenant has had their collections, that property's been flagged up, where does that tenant go? So my point is how do we deal with that sort of scenario? Do we assign the 8 collections to whoever the ratepayer is, so that when the ratepayer changes, they get their 8 collections? Or not?
Well, I think from what Mr. Walker was telling me before is that the system is to the property. So it is to the property. It cannot be to individuals. I'm not sure that it's flexible enough to do that. All Mr. Walker has to do is give a nod. No, it isn't. Yeah. So it has to be to the property, doesn't it?
Just
okay.
a point. Chair, can I second, therefore, the position that you set out as option 2 being
recommending to the council? I've got other speakers. I can't remember who was first. I think it was David, but...
Thank you. You could make it very, very simple and charge for everything. Like page 2, the note no exclusionary.
The second paragraph at the top there says, it's noted that across Lancashire, Pendle is the only local authority to provide a free, unlimited service. So, what's special about Pendle? What do you know?
I think we must have the most money, surely.
We must do.
Yeah.
We must do. I mean, as I've said on countless times, we're under significant financial sustainability problems, and we're providing a service here that is valuable. We charge for valuable services. Pest control is one, for example. If we provide these services using council resources, we know every bulky waste collection costs the council money. And there are highly efficient methods to remove waste. The complexity of who's the ratepayer, I'm a tenant, whatever, your landlord should be responsible for these things. As you say, they're a business deductible expense. If he has to hire a skip or whatever, that's the part of managing a property. Halfway down the page, £173,000 a year it costs. And of course it's going to be overspent on the budget we had. It's a very simple one really. Charge for it based on that. If you look down the bottom of page 2, we don't charge. So you'd think, okay then, everyone throws everything away nicely. No, they don't. We are the second highest in the country for fly tipping. Again, we're putting the burden on our environmental services team. We're taking money away from them to give away in this method, and then we're expecting them to do all the fly tipping, which is a ridiculous amount. If we as councillors told residents to please dispose of it properly, use the valuable service, the rates are not onerous. As I've said before, when my mother died, we started emptying her house out. The filed borough council system was fantastically efficient. The men turned up, and it's eco as well. That's the other thing as well. There was the point about where the waste goes. Now, David and his team are doing a lot on recycling, and obviously we want to make sure as much of it gets done. Feeds into the bin discussion as well about replacement bins, if they're recycling, are free. If they're grey, you charge for it because you're not doing your bit to preserve landfill sites, etc. And you're not doing the best for the stats of this council. And as it points out, government income for waste services is based on performance. So in the future, however long that may be, in the future we could be penalised for just throwing things away randomly all over the place. So let's be responsible from a financial point of view, and let's be responsible from a waste point of view. You know, our officers are crying out for help and resources to help them deliver the service as efficiently as possible. We had a briefing session from David just the other week. I don't think any of you attended that one, but the message there was strongly, these numbers are still coming through. Bulky waste, replacement bins, people having astronomical numbers of replacement bins, astronomical numbers of collections of these things. 72 bulky waste items as a group of free things. Who has 72 things to throw away? You know, we're talking bulky things. We're not talking a bin bag. We're talking a sofa, a washing machine, or whatever. These are big things. That's what bulky means. I know I'm falling on deaf ears.
Yeah, well, thank you, David. And I'm fully aware that a previous Conservative administration actually introduced these charges, which we were only too pleased to scrap when we had a majority on the council, and between our two groups at that point, we overturned the decision of the Conservative administration, and I am proud that we provide a service for residents which does reduce the amount of rubbish on our streets and rubbish that is tipped in our laybys, and the fact that we've got a highly efficient enforcement service that is actually identifying the fly tipping that's going on, I think is another thing that Pendle Council can be proud of. But I appreciate it. The Conservatives have consistently made decisions that affect rubbish in Pendle, and they go back to when the Conservative administration at County Hall closed the household waste recycling centre at Colne, which they used to be on Regent Street. They promised that they were going to open another one, but never did. And here we are all these years later, and the Conservatives are once again wanting to introduce charges for bulky household waste. Well, I'm not surprised, but I would save your speeches until we get to the council meeting, because you'll have an opportunity to vote for whatever you want there, and an attempt to persuade others to follow your lead. As far as our group concerned, we have consistently opposed charges, and we will continue to oppose charges. In respect of constraining the demand and preventing people abusing the system, I think the proposal that's been put forward this evening, the recommendation that's been put forward this evening, to limit the number of collections that can be made, will do that adequately and will address excessive use and constrain the budget requirements that Mr Walker and his team have got to live with. So I think there's another two speakers in front of here, but the opportunity for speeches like that is at the council meeting. You'll get your opportunity. Ash.
We will get the opportunity, and we will use that opportunity, because absolutely, I wholeheartedly support the charging scheme. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. It gives simplicity and clarity, as David's already said. And when you look at these statistics, how much worse could it be? How much worse could it be? Now, you can argue that charging is penalising people on low incomes. We've even got a system in this policy that says that it will be reduced by 50% for those on low income. It's built in. It's already cheap at £13.50. It's incredibly cheap. The private sector would struggle to compete with that. They really, really would. Now, you'd be able to expand the offer if you had that money. I mean, people do say, I struggle to get a slot. That's because I think it is being abused. We know it's being abused. And so people who have one item per year are struggling to get that slot for their one item per year because other people are taking the 22, the 34 slots that, you know, that are available. So, you know, restrictions is one thing, but charging would be a restriction. Charging would be the right restriction to make, and people can pay for what they want to use. I think that's the right way to go about things. Now, if you were restricting things to a property, and it was, you know, because that's the constraints of the system that is offered, then I can just see it happening. We have a predominance of terrace streets in Albury. I can see it now that somebody at number 2 will say, oh, damn, we've used our 8 slots this year. Go and see Audrey at number 6. We'll use her slots instead. And they'll pile all the stuff in her yard and they'll have it cleared from hers. There's no way we could police that. There's no way. The simplest and easiest way to do it is to charge. We are an absolute outlier. It will never, you will never convince me that this is not the right thing to do.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're going to convince each other. Sarah.
So very tiny couple of examples. When I was chairman of Cone Town Council, I decided that we would revitalise Cone Outdoor Market, and I called it nursery markets for people who were starting up a business. So I did all the promotion for them and asked people who had a hobby, candle making, cake making, crocheting, to contact me. And I said that the charge for that would be £15. The manager of Cone Market said, I don't understand your reasoning, Councillor Coburn-Price, because they can come to Cone Market and have a stall for free right now, any week they like. Why would they join your nursery market for £15 when they could come for free? And I said, because they value it. I am promoting it. It is valued. It is worth something. People value something. It's not a lot of money, £15, but my nursery markets, on the very first one, completely fully subscribed, compared with totally free Cone Outdoor Market, a couple of stalls. And that is the difference that people see in a value, not a punitive value, just something that's worth something. And my mother-in-law, back to that again, so sorry to labour it, but it just seemed to be so brilliant that her garage and all the things that came from David's grandfather's house, we didn't put it out in the rain, no dogs weed on it. The council came at an exact slot and they told us all of that furniture would have a new life. It wouldn't go to landfill, it would be used again. And that is so valuable. We felt so pleased to see that those things in David's grandfather's house would not be in landfill, they would live again. That is a very strong thing that people would value. We valued it, and I know other people in Cone. And elsewhere in this report, there is a thing that just says about the tiny, modest sums that will be generated from these small charges. And if you add them all up with the bins as well, it comes to about £80,000. It's not a lot of money. But this week, we went on a site visit, you came too. We went to Albert Street and we went to Beaufort Street, Nelson. And I took pictures and I sent them. Mr. Walker doesn't know because he's meant to be on holiday, but he's got a lot of emails from me. And his staff have got these pictures. And as I took the pictures, I accidentally took a picture of Neil Watson standing next to a load of rubbish. And Neil Watson just looked at the rubbish and he looked at me taking the picture and he said, there's no point. It's always like this round here. Now, what is it when a senior officer at this council looks at a councillor, here am I trying to do my best on Back Albert Street, taking a picture of all the rubbish, and he just says it's pointless. It's never pointless. It's never pointless. You've got to keep on top of it. The littering. The littering in Albert Street really, really upset me. It was on the front street and it was on the back street. Brunswick Street, Beaufort Street? I took pictures of it. I couldn't believe it. I've shown it to other people since. It's in the gutter, it's on the pavement, it's everywhere. And we all know that there are no people to fine anybody for littering or dog poo fouling. So that 80,000, that tiny modest sum, could be for that. It could be for just making sure that our streets are litter free, going round Beaufort Street, issuing those fixed penalty notices so that people know that we care. People know that we want to keep the streets clean and we're not just sort of putting up with it swirling round our ankles. It's a small step forward, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. It's quite clear what the Conservatives want to do. and that's something that we've previously rejected, and it's up to the council meeting. I've got 2 more people wanting to come in. I will just comment on the anecdote that you said about Albert Street, and we went to look at a pigeon loft above a property, and the side of the street where the pigeon loft was immaculate, and the people who've got the property in they've got the pigeon loft go to great lengths to keep it tidy. And I've noticed that it's been tidy because I do frequent Adam's Curry House, which is on that gable end, and I've noticed that it's been tidy then. So I accept that, yes, there are littered areas, but I don't think you paint the same. And I don't want to say tar everybody with the same brush, but I will do. You know, you shouldn't tar everybody with the same brush, and I do think that that's a bit irresponsible. Chris?
Thank you, Chairman. I hearing all of the wave of comments in favour of taking payments, and I should say that this applies to both sections of this, but both the...
Well, we'll go on to that bit, yeah?
Well, no, I will say it once instead of twice, and hopefully everybody can get home a couple of minutes earlier. I see more and more that it is that there is this force of feeling towards taking payments. So I only want to reiterate what I said at the beginning, and that is I am not in favour of the principle of payments, but if they are to come in, can we please make sure that there are safety nets for the lower paid and anyone who would have trouble making the payments?
Okay. Well, I'm pretty confident that the executive will not be recommending charging because it's moved and seconded. Zafar is to come in.
I've only done half the job on this.
I know, let's deal with this bit and then we'll come on to that.
I also noted that there was no response from colleagues on the closure of the site, which you quite rightly pointed out, which wasn't reported, which has probably led to a number of the problems that are taking place across the borough. And lastly, on that point, there are other ways to try and deal with educating residents and trying to get them cooperate with using the facilities that are in place. And in fact, Nelson Town Council has budgeted for an environmental warden, which should be coming into place very soon, and working alongside David to try and get that rolled out. And hopefully other town councils may roll out similar initiatives across the borough to try and tackle some of those issues. I say may. Nelson clearly has its challenges, and we're tackling those as well to try and alleviate the environmental and financial impacts it's having on the borough in some ways.
Okay.
Second part of the report.
Right. Well, can we vote on the first part, and then so it's moved and seconded that we go for option 2. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's carried. Insofar as the charging for wheeled bins, my group's position is that option 3, that the number of waste container replacements, I'm changing the word exchanges, I'm saying replacements be limited to 3. So that's the proposition there. And I use the word replacements rather than exchanges because bin theft is a thing, and I don't think you could exchange a non-existent bin for a bin. It'd have to be a replacement bin. So it's choice of words there.
Yeah,
Zafar.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I take the point, and yes, replacement is probably more suitably worded in that regard. Paragraph 5.1 sets out the financial implications, and they are quite dire. As it states, it's likely that the budget for purchasing bins will be exceeded by 33k this financial year, and if the pattern continues, unfortunately, we're going to continue spending. I simply don't get how we're dealing with the numbers that we are when it comes to waste containers. sorry, Chair, if I may.
You
made some
carry on.
remembering on the side, but I just want to make my speech and then hopefully colleagues can come in. That being said, clearly, as you've already pointed out, our job on the executive is to try and find solutions to try and curtail the problems that the department that I'm assisting with has. And I think, as you pointed out, option 3, whereby there isn't going to be a charge for replacement bins, but there certainly has to be a point where we say to residents that enough is enough. You've had one chance, or in this case 3 chances for 3 separate bins, and no more follows that. That will basically mean, I'm hopeful that it means that residents will take more responsibility of taking the bins in after they've been collected, which could be a reason why they are currently going missing, because they're being left around and people are nicking each other's bins, which again I don't understand, but unfortunately it does happen. I'm inundated with issues of that nature where people have complained that the bin's been taken, and when you ask the question, when was your collection? It was 3 days ago. So then why wasn't your bin taken in? So hopefully by coming to a resolution as set out in option 3, hopefully it'll mean when the message gets across to residents, and there's going to be no further free replacements after you've had the chance of one of each, that people will take further responsibility. I also hope that it'll mean the financial impact of our current trend of replacing bins will be curtailed or reduced or decreased. Obviously that's to be seen, but I'd also second and side with option 3 in this scenario. It means that we can deal with theft of bins, and obviously the department will have to deal with how those bins are reported as stolen and all the rest of it. But I think enough is enough. Residents need to understand that taking responsibility for their waste containers, there's a new era, I suppose, in terms of attitudes of this council, and it simply isn't feasible or viable going forward with the current trend. So I'm going to side with option 3, and I'll second your proposal.
Thank you very much. Andy?
For Chair, but I just want to, for clarity, if I'm all behind option 3, and I know I've heard of what ifs plenty tonight. I'm going to ask, what if a resident says, I've had 3 bins already, but there's a 4th one. Would we look at maybe charging at that one then? Or just say, because that's what I'm looking at, a what if on there. Hopefully it never arises.
Okay, well, I mean, I would always have the word reasonable in a way, because you can then look at things. I mean, touch wood, it's not happening at the moment, but certainly 12 months ago we had a spate of bin fires. So bins were being taken and set fire to. I mean, the blue bins were popular because there was paper inside them, so they could set fire to the paper and the bin satellite. So you could see circumstances where somebody suffers a series of bins being taken for them to be fired, and it might be reasonable in those circumstances to acknowledge that it's no fault of the householder. So I think the word reasonable inserted in appropriate places can cover a multitude of sins. But I think the thrust of this is to contain the number of containers that are issued by having that threshold. Asjad?
Completely separate.
Is it?
Going off at
well, it's 8:45, so we don't want to go off at too many tangents.
It's a long-term thing, but what about these, these chipped smart bins?
No. No, we're not having big bin, brother.
Something to look at somewhere down the future.
No. Sorry. Right, it's been moved and seconded. It is a recommendation to the council, so people can speak then. We're going to take a vote, Sarah. It's time's moving on.
Well, I have things to say.
We're going to take a vote. Those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. You can have your say at the council meeting. Now then, item 11, which is probably the most important item on the agenda. So this is Big Bad Lancashire County Council wanting to shunt costs onto us to the tune of, well, up to £2.6 million. So if you're talking about the financial issues, this is the big item. And the least cost to the council would be 50 quid short of £560,000. So huge sums of money. It's all to do with reform-led Lancashire wanting to push the costs onto the council. A few months ago, the county council were telling us that whatever changes it would be, they would be cost neutral to us. That's changed quite significantly. The county council are due to consider this item on the 4th of September. I've asked for a meeting with Stephen Atkinson to discuss this and some other issues, but I'm hoping that reform will not follow through with these changes which just push costs onto people in Pendle. And I know reform said that they were wanting to cut waste, but what they didn't say was that they wanted to put the cost of cutting waste onto other council taxpayers. In other words, moving the cost from the county council to people in Pendle. And because of the unfair way in which those costs are charged out, it means that people in Pendle suffer significantly together with other people in East Lancashire. Again, Zafar, this is your bag.
It is, thank you, Chair. I don't know who was worse, the previous regime or the current regime, because they both haven't helped any of the district councils. And as you quite rightly point out, it's leaving us with £560,000 bill to pick up, and our residents are going to have to essentially pay for that. We are at a situation where in July, I'm reliably informed by Mr. Walker that in July LCC have outrightly stated that they have no budget in handling our waste. And that being said, each district has to handle its own waste or transfer to the Farrington side. That brings about massive complications, not only financial ones. That being said, where we are is where, first, where do we get the money from? We've already been speaking about the financial situation of this council and how long that's going to, or how long can we continue in that form. But looking at the figures, it's just unbelievable. Okay, granted, options 2 and 3 have some assumptions involved. We aren't clear in terms of whether or not those assumptions are going to be positive or negative. But looking at the figures, it's clear that option 1 is probably going to be the only option given our financial circumstances. The last one for 2.6 million quid. Yeah, that sounds like a good option as well, tongue in cheek. Clearly, option 1 is the only option, otherwise our waste will be nowhere to be dealt with. Chairman, it's a dire situation, as I say. I don't know who was worse, the Conservatives at LCC or Reform. Reform, come forward and said, we simply have no budget now, go away and tackle your own problems and deal with your own rubbish. We are here. So I'm siding with option 1 as a proposal for this council to take.
I would support that. I would couple it with a resolution that reiterates our request to Lancashire County Council for them to continue to pay the waste transfer costs, which is the situation at the moment. Our bins tip off the domestic waste at Regent Street in Colne. There's no reason why that shouldn't continue, and there's no reason why Lancashire County Council shouldn't continue to pay for it, rather than shunting £500,000 plus of costs onto the residents of this borough. I've got Andy and then Asjad.
Thank you, Chair. It was announced in the last few days that Burley have got planning permission to build their own waste transfer station at Easonford. I'm just wondering if these figures would take into account if we were to go into talks with them to use theirs. No, it's...
Okay, before you were on this authority,
Yep.
and with the advent of these changes and charges, this council took a long look at creating a waste transfer station at Fleet Street, the current depot, which would have been shared with Burnley. And the investment costs were several millions of pounds, and then the running costs were several £100,000 a year. I think in excess of £500,000. Well in excess of £500,000. Yeah, well in excess of £500,000. So at the budget meeting in February, at our request, we scrapped those plans, and that was on the basis that local government reorganisation means that the current pattern of collection and disposal will change whatever unitary authorities we get. So it was premature to do that. And also on the basis that there is a perfectly good waste transfer station less than a mile away from Fleet Street. So why build a new one, which would mean that, you know, neither of them, or one or the other of them, needed to be there. So it, both for practical purposes and because of LGR, we scrapped the plans, and we've started to invest that money in other things within Pendle. So £750,000 investment in leisure centres, £600,000 investment in acquiring empty properties, which we touched on earlier on, and other things as well. So no, we're not going to go down that route.
Yep.
And in any event, that would equally cost us, because we have to ship the waste down the road. The point that this council has consistently made is Lancashire should continue to pick up the tab. It unfairly discriminates against councils in East Lancashire because of the distances involved, and it means that our council taxpayers would shoulder an unfair part of the burden. And I said it in the introduction, you know, if Reform want to cut waste, don't cut waste by pushing the cost onto Pendle Council and other councils. I've got Asjad and then Zafar again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we just got to make a very strong case with LCC. You know, previously it was the Conservatives who originally started this process of, as you quite commonly say, cost shunt, all this kind of money and the changes onto the local authorities. And then you've got local government reorganisation that's happening, and you know, the way County Council are thinking is that each authority, you know, you've got 2 unitaries and the LCC itself, and then you've got the 13 local authorities, and, you know, each want to have a transfer waste station, and it just doesn't make sense. It's not financially, it's not cost effective, and you kind of put all the extra burden on local residents. And this is a similar exercise to, say, approximately 10 years ago, when there was, like, you know, the waste collection. I think in the region of over £800,000. You know, that was, as a local Pendle council, you know, we had to pick up the tab, and again it's cross-shunted to us without any help, any contribution from Lancashire County Council, and again it was under the Conservatives. So it's ridiculous.
Thank you. Zafar.
Yeah, just lastly, Chair, in fact, option 1, meaning that we use the Pendle transfer site, would also mean that we could potentially use the site for, not to forget, the weekly food waste collection as well. So we're being pragmatic with option 1, not only financially but also practically, in terms of the future demands that are going to arise due to the weekly food waste collections too. So hopefully that site can be used for that purpose too.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's moved and seconded that we go for option 1. and that we reiterate our request to Lancashire County Council for them to continue to pay for the costs of waste transfer. Can we take a vote on that? All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. Item 12 is the forward plan. Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Thank you. Now then, item 13, unlucky for some, exclusion of press and public. We have got some items that need to be taken in private. One item anyway. So, Robbie, can I thank you very much for coming along? Just whilst you're walking out, have you got any questions for us?
I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I'll probably drop you an email just for clarification on the joint ventures.
Okay.
What that really means practically. But it's probably best just to, I'll drop you an email.
Yeah, yeah. Lovely.
But thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, would somebody move exclusion of press and public? Moved and seconded. Those in favour? Don't include you, Chris. You don't get an early bath. That's carried. So, thank you very much.